And it's not as if we didn't know how our gallant Soviet ally would behave before we began our effort to destroy Hitler and his forces. We had plenty of evidence of massive Soviet atrocities even before the war began. Our government knew what the communists had done in Ukraine. Our government knew about the mass arrests and executions in the Soviet Union. And before we crossed the English Channel to invade Europe, we knew about the mass executions of Polish officers by the Reds at Katyn and elsewhere. And yet, we allied ourselves with the mass murderers. We helped the mass murderers and mass rapists murder and rape millions of more Europeans. And so the claim that we were going to war to fight evil is simply a lie. The Second World War was not a good war. It was not a moral war. It was the most atrocious war of modern times. And we were on the side of those committing nearly all of the atrocities during that war. We were deliberately on the side of evil. And there is just one reason that we fought on the side of evil. It was because that was the Jewish side. In the years before the war, Hitler wasn't rounding up people by the thousands and shooting them the way the communists were. Hitler wasn't shooting anybody. His SS troops weren't raping or terrorizing anyone either. Hitler was doing one thing which resulted in a huge, lying, hate propaganda effort against him from Hollywood. That one thing was Hitler's campaign to break the grip of the Jews on Germany. In Germany, Hitler took the news and entertainment media away from the Jews. He kicked them out of the legal profession, which they had monopolized. He kicked them out of the teaching profession, where they had been pumping their ideas into the heads of German children. And Hitler did all of this peacefully, non-violently. He didn't round up Jews and shoot them. He simply made it illegal for them to own German newspapers and German radio stations. He made it illegal for them to practice law or to teach in German schools. And so the Jews were leaving Germany. Between 1933 and 1939, 2/3 of the Jews in Germany immigrated. At the same time, the Jewish commissars in the Soviet Union were butchering millions of people. But the hate propaganda coming out of Hollywood was entirely anti-German, not anti-Soviet. The Jews' only concern was the welfare of their fellow Jews. They didn't care how many Russians or Ukrainians were murdered, but they screeched at the top of their lungs when Hitler took the German media away from them. And they lied to the American people about what was happening in Europe. They lied in order to make us hate the Germans the way they did. When a Jew assassinated a German diplomat in Paris in 1938, and the German people reacted by smashing up Jewish department stores and synagogues in several German cities, the Jewish news media in the United States reported the incident as if Jews were being massacred wholesale in Germany. That was the famous Crystal Night, which the Jews still continue to remind us of every year in order to milk a little more sympathy from us. The picture of Germany painted by Jewish hate propaganda in the United States during the years preceding the Second World War was a complete distortion of reality. Americans were told that Germans lived in constant fear of the Gestapo and the SS, that Hitler was a madman who terrorized the German people and who fell to the floor and chewed the edge of his carpet when he became angry. Americans were told that Germany was a land of concentration camps and barbed wire and police dogs. Our invasion of Germany was to be a liberation of the German people from the tyrannical rule of Hitler and the SS. That's actually the word the Jewish propagandists used to describe the American and Soviet terror bombing, rape, and dismemberment of Germany. Liberation. The American and Soviet invaders were to be the liberators. Of course, the Jews didn't control all of the mass media before the Second World War. They didn't control the National Geographic magazine, for example. And this magazine, with its articles and photographs on life in Germany, flatly contradicted the hate propaganda coming from Hollywood. A good example, if you have access to old National Geographics, is the February 1937 issue. February 1937. But the National Geographic magazine wasn't really a mass medium, and Jewish Hollywood had a much stronger grip on the average American's mind. And so the image of Germany most Americans had was the Jewish image of a land of terror and fear and brutality and repression controlled by Hitler's SS automatons, a land which needed to be liberated and which was a deadly menace to America. The hate propagandists of Hollywood lied us into the most murderous and destructive war of all time solely because they hated the Germans and they wanted us to destroy the Germans for them. And they have maintained their pre-war lies even to this day. Their portrayal of Hitler as a crazed carpet chewer and the SS as a gang of sadistic thugs. And they have added to this their post-war hate propaganda of gas chambers and of lampshades and soap supposedly made from the bodies of murdered Jews. Most Americans still believe that their fathers or grandfathers liberated Germany and saved the world. They still believe that the Second World War was a necessary war and a good war. And the reason they believe it is that they have seen hundreds of Hollywood films and television shows which have repeated these same lies to them over and over and over again. And no public figure has ever had the courage or honesty to contradict them. We're still hearing the same lies in films like Steven Spielberg's Saving Private Ryan and in the reviews of that film in the controlled media. Americans as liberators. The fact is that Hollywood's lies about Germany led to millions of white Americans and Europeans being slaughtered solely for the sake of punishing the Germans for throwing the Jews out of Germany. And we are put at a great disadvantage even today by those same lies because they prevent so many of us from examining the past honestly. And if we cannot understand what happened in the past, we are much less likely to choose a wise course into the future.